Okay, I don't remember what I just asked you. Oh, ironing.
I never particularly cared for ironing.
You said there was a box.
Oh, yes, that was after I was married. When I'd make clothes and the fabric, things had to be ironed, they would go into the ironing box. And the kids would outgrow the things before they ever got out of the ironing box and got ironed. And that's even after we had a really good iron. Not my favorite thing.
When do you remember getting an electric iron?
No, I don't remember.
You don't remember that? It wasn't like
It wasn't a big thing in my life.
So did you mostly buy or make your own clothing?
Well, that's hard. I know we made a lot of my stuff, and when I was in school, clear up through, even when I was in college, women did not wear pants, girls did not wear pants or shorts. I mean, we wore dresses and skirts and blouses, and most of the time in junior high, I wore skirts and blouses or skirts and sweaters. I don't remember wearing dresses because they were ill-fitting. It was probably half and half. I remember a pair of shoes that I had, and they were too large for me. And so we stuffed newspaper in the toes of them so I could still wear them. No wonder I fell down a lot. And we didn't wear sandals, and all through school pretty much I wore saddle shoes. You know, those they're white on the front and on the back, and then they got either blue or black or brown. Mine were usually blue and white saddle shoes.
When did you learn about the mechanics of a car, and who taught you? Because I know you know stuff.
When I got married. We didn't have a car until I was probably at least 18, and I didn't learn to drive. My brother Walt, we always called him Walter, but now I call him Walt. He's the one who could drive, and so he got a driver's license at 16, and the rest of us in the family could drive. Anyway, made it a little, it wasn't a really great situation, but it was so funny. We had bought a car, this is when I was a teenager. We had bought an old car that somebody was selling, like an old coupe from the 30s or something like that. And somebody actually drove it down that driveway, which, as I say, was a terrible angle. Here's the street up here, and here's our driveway, and then there's a little flat space, and then this is the den, then the house is up here. We bought it, I don't know why, as I say, nobody was driving, and I would sit out in that car and pretend to drive and shift gears, and my brother used to say, hey, if you keep it neutral, you get better gas mileage. I didn't know what that meant, but I didn't think it was right. Anyway, I was in college, and my younger brother was out of high school, and this was during the Korean War, and he didn't want to wait around to be drafted, so he signed up to be drafted so that he would go into the service earlier. Well, he was dating a gal who was still in high school, and he would go over occasionally and pick her up and so on. I'm trying to think if we still had that other car. I don't know what the deal was. Anyway, he saw, see, everybody in the ward went to a different high school than I did. I was the only one who went to Belmont, and everybody else went to John Marshall. Boo, our Belmont crosstown rival. Anyway, he saw a car near the school that was for sale. It was a 1938 Ford Coupe that had been nosed and decked. That meant the hood ornament was taken off and it was all smooth, and for the trunk, the ornament the handle was taken off, and that was all smooth, and it was metallic maroon paint job, and it had big moon hubcaps and rippled leather upholstery inside, maroon and cream. I mean, really sporty looking car. And so he decided, since I had $500 in the bank, that I should buy the car. He would teach me how to drive, and then whenever he came home from Fort Ord on leave, he could drive the car. Well, that sounded reasonable. The guy wouldn't sell it to me. He was going into the service, and he would rather put it up on blocks in his garage than sell it to a girl. So my brother just took my money and went over and bought the car, and then we put it in my name. And so my brother took me out. I had one lesson. I'm in college, and he's going into the service, and you can't teach anybody to drive where we live because we're up this tremendous steep hill. So we drove down to a flat area called the Silver Lake area. It was actually a reservoir that had trees all around and was fenced, and you didn't go swimming. That was municipal drinking water. Anyway, so he pulls over and he says, okay, and the street went down and then it divided to go around the lake. And he says, okay, go down here and go on the left one. So I don't know anything about it, and it's, 3 on the floor. And so, okay, you start the gas, you've got it in low gear, and you're going too fast, so you brake, and you're going too slow, and so you on the gas, you're trying to shift into second gear, and I didn't make that curve, and I jumped the curb. And this is tube tires, no radials, nothing like that, and it had really wide white sidewalls. Well, it cracked the sidewall on the tire, and the tube started coming out through that crack. So, okay, move over. And so he drove me home, and I went in my room and I cried. I was so upset. So I didn't know what to do because there's no way, and I wasn't getting along that well with Walt at that particular time. I thought he was a jerk and so on and so forth. So I didn't know what I was going to do. How I now had a car that was paid for, and okay, there's no way I was going to drive down that driveway. So of course it's parked up here on the street. So the first night they stole all my hubcaps, my beautiful, great, big, huge moon hubcaps. They were gone, and I never replaced them. I figured what would be the point. And I bought one of these like nylon parachute cover, and so I had covered it, and that was pointless. But anyway, so a neighbor down the street that our dog hated, anytime he would come close to our door, that dog would see we had screen doors.
Your phone's ringing.
That's where the phone is. Oh, I'm sorry. Excuse me. But I didn't know where this phone was, so that was fine.
Well, now we know.
Now we know.
Okay, you're saying your neighbor.
Oh, okay.
Your neighbor.
Whenever he would come near our door, we had this little, let's see, Poochie was a little Chihuahua. He was some kind of a mix, I'm sure. He would run to that front screen door and bark like he was going to tear the guy apart. Anyway, he offered to teach me how to drive, and he did, and he was a very good teacher. I didn't really like him. I think I was just a little afraid of him. But he would drive down the hill and take me onto a level residential area and make stop and start and the whole bit. And once I got good enough, he had me drive up the hill and stop on the middle of the hill and shift down into low gear and then get it going back up without coasting back down the hill backwards. He did a very good job. I passed the test on the first time for my driver's license.
So when did you learn how to maintain a car?
It was after I was married because I really didn't know anything about this. I put gas in it, and occasionally when it needed something, like when it needed a new clutch, Dick and I weren't dating, but he would come down from Sacramento and stay with his brother Jack, and then Jack would come over and fix my car. But I really didn't, you just put gas in it, and I knew how to check the oil, I knew how to check the water, but other than that, I didn't do anything on it. But then after I got married, I've rebuilt carburetors and cleaned them and relined with assistance. Some of it I've done all by myself, but we relined brakes and changed water pumps. And there's a fan on the front there, and one of the blades got broken off, so I went down and got the part, and I actually fixed that all by myself. Dick just told me what to do, and I did it. And the problem with that is you had to take off all the fan belts to be able to get to that, and then put them all. It was a bit of a job, but yeah, I did that one by myself. And we flushed radiators and just done all kinds of things. But I don't know where Dick learned. I guess he learned some from his dad and some from just personal experience. But he knew what to do, and we did it because we couldn't afford. Oh, I couldn't tell you how many times we changed the oil. Not my favorite job. In fact, your mom, I'm never going to check under the hood, and I'm never going to, because when she was responsible for one of the cars, it was her responsibility to check the oil and the water and the battery and all the things that you had to do. And now you lift the wood and you say, "Whoa, it's a bunch of spaghetti in here. I don't know what to do." But back then, you just did it yourself, and she vowed she was never going to do that again when she got married, and I don't think she ever has.
I don't know.
It's all right. Eileen said after her experiences that she was never going to dig another hole or another trench, but she has.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, let me see here. I know we talked about family that lived far away, and you didn't really see them that often.
Yeah, that was my dad's parents lived in Galesburg, Illinois, and I only saw his mother once, my grandmother, when she came out to California, and I never met his dad. And I met a couple of his sisters again when they would come out to visit in California, and then his favorite sister Alice was lived in Ogden, Utah, with her family, and we went back a number of times when I was in high school and visited back there. But my mother's side was my Aunt Margaret. She and her husband and two children lived in El Monte. And again, we didn't have a car, so we didn't see them too frequently either. It was, then it was a big deal to drive it. Well, I guess it is now too, with freeways being what they are. I wouldn't want to do it. But yeah, we just didn't seem to have a big family circle. Of course, then there was my aunt and uncle. I spent up until the time that my aunt got cancer and then died. I spent all my vacation time with my aunt and uncle, my great aunt and uncle.
Who would you say you were closest to in your family?
Like just the five of us?
Yeah.
Uh, we just were a pretty well-knit family. I can't really, up until the time Walt was 16. We got along very well, but when he turned 16, I don't know, somebody turned a switch or something. Because I thought he was pretty obnoxious then, but he seemed to outgrow it by the time he got to about 19 or 20. He seemed to join the world again. I think as far as being similar, Glenn and I were very much alike in temperament, in looks, and in the things we like to do. Whereas Walt and I were very, very different in the things that we like to do. But I remember getting along with him fine. I like both my parents pretty well. My dad was pretty casual and laid back. I think he was shy, but always seemed to be reasonably happy and not moody or anything like that. So I thought he was really a nice guy.
How did you spend your evenings as a family?
We played games. We played games a lot. I don't think we had nearly as much, at least in the elementary school level, I don't think we had nearly the homework that some kids have now. But then we had longer school days. So we spent a lot more time at school than I think they do now. Because we would go in at something like 8 and we wouldn't get out till 3. Whereas I don't think anybody has that long a school day much anymore.
I think high schools, that's about the schedule they have.
Is it?
Mine was 7:45 till 2:50 or something weird. 2:56 or something weird like that. I don't remember exactly. But with the elementary school kids, it's...
Their days seem to get shorter and shorter and fewer and
Well, I know the younger, like kindergartners, they have half days.
Mm-hmm.
But I think for the older kids, it's about that long. I don't know.
Anyway, but we played games, and we, of course, did not use regular cards. We used flinch cards, and we played other kinds of, board games and pickup sticks, and our special brand of pickup sticks, in the dark.
Turn off the lights.
Pickup sticks in the dark. I thought Walt was always a bit of a poor sport. He always wanted to win. In fact, later, my older brother always used to say, it isn't how you play the game, it's whether you win or lose. My brothers tried to teach me poker, and that was after we were older. I never played chess. I got to the point now I hate checkers. Boring, boring, boring. But I like Chinese checkers. We used to play Chinese checkers a lot. And we had this one game. It was with, I guess they're called flinch cards. They're 4 different suits, different colors, and they go from 1 to 13 or 14, something like that. And we used to do bidding. Um, and you know, if you get the bid, you make what color is trump and
Like, what's that game?
hearts. I don't
No,
know.
it's,
I don't know.
Pinnacle or...
Oh, I don't know. I've never played
I think
Pinochle.
that is...
Okay, I have
I
no
can't
idea.
remember. I learned it, but I...
Well, I never did. My in-laws used to play Pinochle, but I never particularly wanted to learn. But one time my parents told us about what's called blind bidding. You would do all the bidding without picking up your cards. We as kids, we thought that was marvelous. We loved it because you could get your choice of, you could make what was trump, and maybe you make green trump and you pick up your hand, you don't have a single green card in it. It was always fun, but my parents preferred not to play that because there's no skill involved. It's just blind luck. But we enjoyed, and we used to do jigsaw puzzles, and
What are flinch cards?
I think that's the one that's 4 suits, different colors, from 1 to, I think it's 14 is the
Okay.
highest. I think that's what it was. I found some at a garage sale, and I actually bought a deck of them, but there's nobody to play with.
Could take it to family home evening, right?
We have one of our group that does not like games.
Oh.
In fact, after we got married and after the kids were old enough to take their turns, Dick didn't like games really well, and so
Yeah.
usually when it was Susan's turn or Chris's turn or Lean's turn or Carolyn's turn, they would always have us play a game because their dad just hated it. But he was a good sport. He would do it.
Did you get an allowance?
My Aunt Tessie gave me 10 cents a week, and that was all the allowance I ever got.
What did you spend it on?
Candy. When we were there on Patton Street, when you walked up the hill, not as well, it might have been as steep as our driveway when we lived on North Alvarado, but that was Temple Street, and if you turned right on our side of Temple Street, because busy street, you wouldn't even try to cross it, you would go down, and there was on the corner, it was called Paul's Drugstore, and we went there often enough, and that's where I developed a liking for chocolate ice cream sodas. Love chocolate ice cream sodas. Anyway, they even had something called the Pont Special. I don't remember what it was. It was something my mother would order. And they'd have little penny candies and stuff. And I know I stole one once.
Shocking.
Well, it is, because I'm not sure I regret it. Because I never told him. I never told my mother. But yeah, I snuck one of the penny candies one time. Anyway, one of my older brother Glenn's best friends, Claudio Solara, lived near Paul's Drugstore. I don't know why I remember these things. And there was a little Japanese market, and we couldn't understand during World War II why they sent these people away. I mean, I never could understand, and my mother couldn't explain it to me. My mother used to call them concentration camps when they collected all the Japanese and sent them to these internment camps in Inyokern and all these horrible, horrible places.
How old were you when that happened?
Let's see, that was in 41. I would have been 10 years old. The war had already been going on, but we weren't involved in it.
Right.
And so it was December 1941. I had just turned 10 years old when the Japanese struck Pearl Harbor. And it wasn't too long after that when these Japanese people, I probably knew their name at the time, I don't remember it now. They were so kind. It was just a little mom and pop store. And we'd go in there, and when they'd have cherries, which wasn't very often, they'd give us maybe 3 cherries free without having to pay for them. And when they would sell lunch meat and not in package, nothing was prepackaged like that, and so they just have these big bologna.
Mm-hmm.
And when they had to cut a new one, you have that end on it that they can't use. And if we were there at the time, they would give us the end of the bologna, and just really very, very nice to deal with. And so it was a hard thing when I guess they lost everything. So many of the Japanese families did.
They ended up having to close their
Somebody else
store or
probably took over the
bought
store.
it?
I don't remember, but after they left, it just wasn't the same. But
Were there any other memories of
World War II.
wartime?
Well, when let's see, the Germans surrendered first, and when that news came, we had a little piece of fireworks. And so, can we shoot it off? To celebrate. Can we shoot it off? And my folks said yes. And so we put it out on the lawn and lit it, and it fizzled a little, and then it went boom, and it spread little pieces of paper about this size that had Asian writing on it. They'll think we're spies. They'll think we're spies. And the wind was blowing it around, and we're running around like a bunch of idiots trying to pick up every one of these little scraps of paper so that people won't think we're Japanese spies. Just, it's really funny things that you think of. And we used to, my dad had these hats that they had to wear. It looks rather military. It's fairly heavy with a stiff brim and everything. And so when they'd wear out, why, we would get them to play with them. And so Glenn was always pretty inventive. And so he was always the German Gestapo, and we would put on these little plays. And, the thing is, there was no television. We never saw anything on television. Occasionally when you go to the movies, there would be the newsreel. Because when you went to the movies, there was if you went Saturday afternoon, there was the serial, then there was a comedy, 2 movies, and a newsreel for a quarter.
Not bad.
Anyway, and so you would maybe see things that had happened maybe a month before, or usually a month before, and you'd see these things that not like you see now on the front page of your newspaper. It was pretty shocking, but to us, so we were doing that. And so when you have a beer opener and you have a lid and you make 4 things on it and then cut the lid off, then you have an iron cross, which was a German thing. And so I was making myself an iron cross, and I don't even remember which finger now. I have quite a scar there. I cut myself on that can, and my folks were in the living room and I'm in the kitchen, and I didn't want to tell anybody what I was doing, and I couldn't get the blood to stop. I was a little scared there for a while, but yeah, we used to put on plays, and Glenn would sometimes be the Gestapo, which, we didn't have any concept of how bad things really were. We would get a newspaper, and we had blackouts occasionally in Los Angeles because, there were supposed to be the Japanese subs off the coast of California, and we'd have the sirens go, and it was a bit of a scary time. And then after they dropped the atomic bomb, I used to have nightmares because we would see that in the newsreel, where when they were testing it on this, this atoll out there in the Pacific or whatever, and you'd see this huge mushroom. I had nightmares for years about an atomic bomb.
Do you remember ever talking with your family about that? Or any world events or politics?
Nah.
It says President Roosevelt here.
I'm sure we must have heard his broadcast, because we did have a radio. Of course, that was long before we ever had a television. We hadn't invented them yet. I'm sure we heard it. I just, a lot of that I just don't remember. My parents were Democrats, I do know that. I mean, we were for Roosevelt all the way, and you don't change horses in the middle of the stream was the big thing, and so on and so forth. And when I got married, I found that I wasn't a Democrat anymore. I had to be a Republican, because Dick said there was no point in my canceling out his vote. And I guess politics just never really meant that much. So, okay, fine, I'm a Republican now. My parents, I'm sure, were Democrats because they supported unions, and my dad, of course, was a union member, and felt that a lot of his working conditions and pay increases were a result of the union, and I'm sure at that time that was probably very, very true. So that's fine. I was a union person when I was younger. Now I don't know what I guess I'm still a Republican.
Okay. Well, I think we already talked about what your dad did for a living, and that what your mom ever did as for work.
Yeah, she at that time worked for Goodman and Son, and then they fired her after years. Yeah, she didn't have a clue. I mean, she was head of her department. They did the enameling on things. And she came in one day and they said, we don't need your services anymore, which was really a blow to her self-esteem, if nothing else, and also to our income. Not that she made a huge amount. Nobody made a huge amount then, but it was a difficult time for her. I only realized that in retrospect. I'm sure I wasn't aware of it at the time. I think kids a lot of times these things just go right over their heads.
Right.
And it's only when you think about it later, you think how difficult it must have been for her.
Mm-hmm.
And her weight fluctuated a lot, and I don't know whether that was part of it. She always seemed to be on a diet, and there were I have pictures of her when she was really rather round. In fact, I have some pictures of her I really ought to destroy. She was, her hair is all pulled back, and they're just horrible looking pictures, but I haven't thrown them away.
Did you ever contribute to the family income?
Let's see, I didn't have any money. My 10 cents a week wouldn't have done very much. Well, I did have some money later, and I'm trying to think how that worked out. When I think it was in high school, my Aunt Tessie had died years before, and my uncle had become pretty much of a recluse up in the mountains out of Independence. And he wrote to me. In fact, I save letters. I still have letters that my Uncle Bill wrote to me. And when he died, he didn't really have very much, and I guess my grandmother got it. I have no idea, except he and my aunt had taken out a $2,500 insurance policy, and it was mentioned in his will. So I got $2,500, which is, $2,500 at that time was a lot. But we had to go to court. So ridiculous, and pay an attorney to have my parent made my guardian. I don't know, some crazy thing to be able to get the money. I don't know what it can be. So it went into a bank account, and then I took out something like $25, probably was $25 a month. And so then I was buying some of my own clothes, and so that helped. And then, let's see, I quit college at the end of my junior year. I decided I had enough school. I was sick of school, actually, is what it was, and I decided I'd work for a year and then decide what to do from there, whether to go back for the final year and get my degree, which I never did. And so when I went to work, I did it in envelopes. I had one envelope for my tithing, one for my gas money, because I had my car then, and I guess one for the rest of it. And I only made gross, the full amount. I made $195 a month, if you can believe that.
Where did you work?
I worked at Occidental Life Insurance Company in downtown Los Angeles.
Was that your first job?
No, I had some part-time employment. When I was in college, I worked for a guy, Arrow Wire, A-R-E-O, Arrow Wire Company. He made lampshade frames. It was at that particular time very popular for ladies to make and decorate their own lampshade frames, lampshades, and so he made metal frames, and he was trying to get his business started. He worked at Lockheed on the swing shift, so he would work in the morning doing orders, and then I would come in so he could go to work at Lockheed until it was time, 5 o'clock, to close the place. So I worked there maybe 3 to 5 or something like that, and occasionally he would actually show me how to use some of the equipment. He said if I'd been a man, he'd have taken me into partnership and he'd have taught me how to use the welder, but he wouldn't. Because I wasn't a man, he wouldn't teach me how to use, but he'd let me use the other equipment, and I would sometimes do part of the orders. It was, it was the lampshade frame. That's.
Can we get a shot of the while you talk
We'd have
about
to turn it over so you could see the top. That was the kind of stuff I was working on. Anyway, and I'd take orders on the phone, and maybe somebody would come to pick up something. That was about it. But I mainly would sit there and do my homework. Right. And then I would actually babysit for them occasionally. And then I had a part-time job. One summer, the position was called a VAMP girl, V-A-M-P. I made reeds for saxophones. The little piece of bamboo-like stuff would come already, and then I had a diamond drill machine that had a foot thing, and you put the foot up, and it would come down, and it would, I don't know if you've ever seen one of these reeds, it would do that shaving off, and you would take it out of there, and you'd look to see if there were any splits in it, and if not, you would very carefully put it in this box. Boring, but I did that. And then I worked at it was a part-time job. I got it through the college. You know, it was on the bulletin board. It was the Famous Department Store. That's the name of it. Famous Department Store. And I think they were being bought out or something like that. And but they were running a print shop, and so they hired me in the print shop. And he said if I'd been a man, he'd have taught me the print business. Man. I mean, I'm very efficient, but I was the wrong sex.
Jeez.
Anyway, that's right. I always wanted to be a man. I thought it was really crazy having to be a woman. Anyway, so they would print out numbered, like a pad. You would fill out a receipt pad, you know, this size, and they would be numbered in 4 copies and a carbon, and so it would come off the press, and then you would have to send the chipboard in every so often, and if you missed it, then you got all this stuff falling all over the floor. Then you had to stop the presses, and anyway, it was interesting. So I worked there in the print shop for a while, and then they didn't need me anymore, and so they were being bought out. So they had hired a bunch of gals, and you sat in a sort of warehouse at this big table, and they had. They weren't using plastic bags then, everything was paper, and it was this very lightweight paper, and it was a bag about this long, about this wide, and it didn't have a bottom like a grocery bag, you know, it was just, came to a point there, and anyway, and it had a thing about this big that said Famous Department Store, and we were taking tape and putting tape and covering that so this other store could use these bags. I had some really interesting jobs. So again, you know, buying my own gas for my car, and I would buy groceries and pretty much buy my own clothes with some of these little part-time jobs, and I still did babysitting occasionally, 25 cents an hour. I can't believe it. Now what Eileen pays to babysitters to me is just unbelievable.
Yep.
25 cents an hour, and it didn't matter how many kids. It's one family that took our wedding pictures. I babysat for them. They had 5 or 6 kids, all different ages. 25 cents an hour. Oh well.
Maybe that's why they always had you babysit. Maybe well, everybody else was charging something else.
That's evident. That was the going thing, because I had other friends who babysat, and that's what people paid, 25 cents an hour. Even this, he wasn't a doctor. He had a medical degree. He was an anesthesiologist. 25 cents an hour. They had 3 kids. Time to go to bed. I gotta brush my teeth. And his brother says he hasn't brushed his teeth in 6 months. Anything does not have to go to bed. Oh, that was Bernice Jameson, her family. I remembered her name.
Did you have a garden at your house?
When we lived there on Patton Street, no, we did not have a garden per se. We had a very small space in which we could have gardened, but with my parents both working, it just, and my grandmother had a green thumb, and she had, her whole yard was planted and things. There was one, between our yard and hers, there was about this much space, and it was always shady, and there were stepping stones. I loved it over there, and she had something called a fajoya that had fruit from time to time, which I would eat when nobody was looking. And all, you know, plants that grew in shady spots. And then she had along the fence, well, always every year we had the sweet peas growing that I would take my bouquet, and her front yard, she just had garden everywhere, and she did have some vegetables, but she had lots of fuchsias and roses and fig tree and Concord grapes. But we had, instead, in the backyard, we had a duplex, and so then there was a couple of trees in the back. There was a poplar and a fig tree, and other than that, no, it was just sort of dead grass. And we had an avocado tree that had blooms by the millions, but never have an avocado on it, never. I remember playing in the dirt underneath the avocado tree. That was nice.
It says So you had fig trees. Did you make fig jam?
My grandmother did, actually, yes. And so I loved fig jam, and so I made it one year. And of course, my grandmother in those days didn't have two-piece lids. You put um, wax,
Wax.
paraffin
Yeah.
on the top, and then you put cloth on it with a string. Oh, you put a string down in there, so when you wanted to take the paraffin off, you could pull the string, and that would pull it out. And hers was always good. The one time I made it, I'm using a two-piece lid, it got mold underneath it, and I never made it again. I love figs, and I do eat them. I buy them at farmer's market, and I leave a tree. I'm waiting for hers to get ripe. But when we lived up on North Alvarado, we had berries and strawberries, and we planted peas and a few other things, but not because again we're on the side of a hill and everything has to be terraced. But yeah, I took care of the garden, and we had gophers, and so we had along this one fence that went down the hill. We had, they might have been raspberries, I don't recall, but they were some kind of berries that grew on the fence. And you start the water at the top, and then you have to go out and check it very frequently because it goes maybe 2 feet and then it all goes down in the gopher hole. So then you got to try to fill up that gopher hole so that the water will continue to do the berries. And my mother at the Inman and Sons had made each of us a really beautiful initial ring with an old English script letter. Mine, of course, was a B, Glenn's was a G, and Walter's was a W. In fact, there's an interesting story about that. That's when we were living at my grandmother's, and my mother had a really beautiful bureau that had a big round mirror and had little drawers every place. And so one day when she was at work, I was looking in the drawers, and I found these 3 little boxes from Inman and Son. I looked at them, and I realized they must have been Christmas presents. And so I would periodically go back and look at them. And then I really felt badly that I had found them, because then it was, you have to, and I'd already seen them for months. Anyway, I was one day filling in the gopher holes and trying to get the watering done, and when I got all finished, I got in the house and realized my ring was gone. So it evidently is someplace underground at 1942 North Alvarado in Los Angeles. Evidently, it slipped off during. So I had my brother Glenn's. I wore his for years, and then I think I eventually gave it back to him. He didn't know I had it.
He didn't wear it?
No. Some people don't wear rings.
Yeah.
Dick never wore a ring.
Yeah. Let's see. Did you have chickens or any
My
kind of
Aunt
animals?
Tessie, we had chickens, yeah. Love chickens. She had chickens and a dog, Beans.
That's
And we actually, after I was in junior high, when we moved to North Alvarado, we decided it would be nice to get a dog. So we got, I don't know who picked the breed, but we actually got a Boston Terrier, a little black and white dog. And he was born on Lincoln's birthday. And so we all picked a name and put it in a hat, and they would draw it out. Well, of course, my mother wanted to name it Mr. Lincoln, and I don't remember what the others were. I only remember my mother's and mine. Mine was Shorty, because they kept saying, "Oh, look at this funny short little legs, look at his short little legs." So I, Shorty. And it was my name they picked out, so our dog was Shorty, and my mother was disappointed we didn't call him Mr. Lincoln. Anyway,
she could have called him that.
Yeah, but he's not an inside dog. He was outside all the time. Almost never came in the house.
Let's see. Okay. What kinds of things did you do on Sunday?
Okay, we'll have to divide that. When we were Methodists and when we were Mormons. When we were Methodists, we would go over to my grandmother's and have breakfast, usually chorizo gravy and homemade biscuits. And then the 5 of us would walk to church. And we had such a beautiful stained glass window, but we were not allowed to turn around and look at it, because it was the whole wall was this gigantic stained glass window, and I think it was Jesus holding a lamb with some other lambs around, just beautiful. But we had a very elderly minister, and he would get up almost every Sunday and preach and get to crying because his wife had died and so on and so forth. And we did have Sunday school, because it was Mrs. Bagley taught our Sunday school class. We heard all about her relatives. I don't remember much of anything else. And it had gotten, the membership had dwindled so much, there were very few children, and so all 3 of us were in the same class. And we weren't unhappy there. We sang in the choir, and when we would have dinners, the three of us would play our violins, you know, in a trio and this kind of stuff. Um, and on occasion, in our Sunday clothes, we would then walk back to the Red Street cars, go and go down to the beach in our Sunday clothes, just to go to the beach. And we had a little run-down miniature golf place that we would go to, you know, where the water traps are all scummy. And
Yeah.
but we enjoyed doing that. We didn't do it a whole lot, but periodically we'd do that. And then occasionally we would go to, they called it a plunge. What it was a swimming pool, you know, all enclosed. And the four of us would sit there. My dad would go and rent a bathing suit, and he'd go swimming while the four of us sat on a bench and watched. We were a funny family. Well, none of us could swim except my dad. So we'd watch him swim. And occasionally he'd dive off the board and make a really belly flop, and it was, I don't know, we were different. We really were. Anyway, and then he'd, you know, get dressed, and we'd walk back to where we'd catch the streetcar and go back home again. And that's pretty much what I remember on Sundays. And then after we started investigating the church, we were living up on the hill in North Alvarado, and we would have to walk down, and there was a little shuttle bus that actually ran on Sundays. And so we would take it to within a couple of blocks of the ward building. And then we'd go there, and then we'd come home. And then after we joined the church, you know, my dad eventually was the ward clerk, the financial ward clerk, and that's when he would sit in this one little room, and we had a different kind of a building too. Anyway, he would sit in this little room, and you would line up, and you would go to him and pay your tithing, and he'd write you out a receipt and take your tithing, and then he'd bring the tithing home, and my mom would be a nervous wreck, and then the bishop would come up. He was a policeman. Then our bishop then was a policeman. So he would come up on his motorcycle in his full uniform, and we always thought, the neighbors thought, boy, they must really be bad. The police are always coming. Anyway, they would count the money, and then my mom would take it to the bank. She hated it when we had that tithing money in the house overnight. But then we just, and I will admit, we were having firesides then, and they seemed to lump children and adults together, because we all went to the fireside, and they'd serve quite often donuts and apple cider. It got to the point where I just hated apple cider. Or what we would call Mormon punch, which was Hawaiian punch, the red stuff.
Yeah.
That was quite frequently, it was Hawaiian punch. Or they'd serve watermelon. We'd sit outside, and the fireside was outside in this one lady's yard, which was sort of fun, and no lawn, just dirt, and we'd sit and spit out all the watermelon seeds.
How many people were in the church?
In the ward?
Yeah, in the ward.
Golly, it was a fairly small building, and it was really pretty full. It's hard to estimate.
Was it like a branch size or?
No, it was probably a little bigger than a branch, but certainly not like Roseville Third Ward or something like that. Not probably as much as we have in our ward, because the ward building was in a residential area off a busy street, which above the busy street, Riverside Drive, was a park area. In fact, they eventually built, what is the one where the Dodgers play? Chavez Ravine.
I have no idea.
I can't remember the name of it. Dodger Stadium is in Exposition Park, and so that there wasn't a lot of people to draw from. In fact, they changed ward boundaries at one time, and so people that had been going to the Hollywood ward were then in our ward, and they weren't going to come because they had heard about the Mexicans that went to our ward. Just real snobs. It was really bad there for a while. Anyway.
So what other things did you do on Sunday after you
I can't
joined
remember
the church?
anything else except those. They were indelible. Especially that miniature golf place. We really liked doing that.
Did you keep on doing that, or pretty much?
Not after we joined the church. That we never went to the beach on a Sunday again. But it was interesting because there were groups that we went out to dinner on Sunday nights, went to Chinatown, and nobody seemed to think a thing about it. And now there's no way. For many, many years, I wouldn't consider going to a restaurant on a Sunday. It's just not what I do. I feel it's breaking the Sabbath. But at that time, I mean, the bishop and his wife, and I mean, it was a whole group of maybe 20 people went down to Chinatown for dinner on Sunday night. I used to go, when I had my car, I used to go to, it was Vandekamp's, it was a drive-in, and they made a sandwich called a Longfellow, really, really good. Anyway, I remember one time I had my girlfriend Eileen and girlfriend Nedra, and we were there in my little sporty little car, and so the guys next to us invited us for bowling, I don't know, or something like that, and we started conversing with these other boys, and we said, no, we weren't going to do that. I mean, it's all right to go to a drive-in and eat, but it's not right to go bowling.
That's crossing the line.
Anyway, and so finally, Nedra says, "Oh, but thank you so much for inviting us." And we almost stamped her into the ground. Anyway, and we finally reached a point where you finally say, you know, I think this going out is not the thing we're supposed to be doing on Sunday. And so we stopped doing it. But it was fun. Though I will admit, the one time we went to Chinatown, it probably was the last time I went to Chinatown, I found a fly in my food, and I couldn't eat anymore. And I didn't want to say anything, and so I let everybody else continue to eat, but I didn't eat anymore. Oh, I'm not hungry. Oh, that's terrible. Oh, well, you know, I didn't want to rock the boat.
No, of course
they were all
not.
having such a nice time.
Let's see. Any other special days of the week where you did anything regularly?
No, after we joined church, I will have to admit I hated Mutual. I did everything I could not to go to Mutual. I really did not like to go. It might partly have been because I was the only one in my school, pardon me. And so I didn't have nearly as much things to talk about with the other girls, and though one of them was a good friend, I wasn't comfortable. I hated going, and I was still very shy. It was difficult for me to do that.
Okay, let's talk about Christmas as a child. How did you spend Christmas?
Well, I remember the one year that my brothers and I decided, and I have no idea how, I might have mentioned this before, I have no idea how we did it, but we went down to the railroad yards, because, you know, we were fairly close to downtown Los Angeles. We went down to the railroad yards, and they had boxcars full of Christmas trees, and really cheap. And so we bought a Christmas tree to surprise my folks. And we had very high ceilings in that house, probably 10, 11-foot ceilings. And we got the biggest tree we could get. And of course, as soon as they walked in the house, they knew it was there because it smelled so good. And so it wasn't as much of a surprise as we hoped. We always put up a Christmas tree, but as I say, we hung our stockings next to my grandmother's. I don't think my grandparents ever set up a tree.
How did you decorate it?
You know, what do they call it? The little stuff. We had lights. We never, it was not a candle thing. We always had string lights. Not very many, but we had some. And then we had the little silver stuff, and we had certain ornaments. I had some ornaments because, again, a lot of my Christmas vacation was spent with my great aunt up until, as I say, the time that she died. And I had my own Christmas tree there. In fact, it was a great big tumbleweed. It was, I wrapped walnuts in aluminum foil and somehow hung them on that. And it was, my aunt had bought me, one was an ornament, it was about this high, and it was a pot of hyacinths. Hyacinths at that time were one of my favorite flowers. I love the scent. Anyways, a little pot of hyacinths, and I had several other ornaments that were my special ornaments that my aunt had bought me. And so then after I was at home, those were hung on the tree, and we each had, you know, some special ornaments that we liked, and of course everything was glass and breakable. And then the silver strands of stuff, whatever.
Tinsel.
Yes. My dad and my brothers and I, we like take by the handful and throw it on the tree. My mother, strand at a time, and she didn't like it when we threw it on the tree. was fun. It was only I became more strange, I think. I don't know that you were aware of when we were there on North Alvarado, on Rio Vista. Eileen and Carolyn, I think, were still at home, and David. And so after Christmas, we would go through the neighborhood and collect trees and bring back, and then we would line them against the back fence and wait till they get really dry, and then I'd cut them up and we'd burn them up in the fireplace. And
It's funny you should mention going through the neighborhood collecting trees. We used to do that because people would put their trees out in the
street alley.
In the alley, and we just, where the trash cans are, and we'd go, and I'm like 8 years old, going with Keith and Alyssa and Leslie, and we'd drag as many trees back as we could to our house and put them all along the swing set.
You came by it naturally.
It's
in the genes.
And some of them, we never had tinsel on our trees, and some of them would have tinsel on them, and we'd be all excited. And
I get excited several times. We brought a tree back that had an ornament, still had a glass ornament on it, and they're in our
the flocked ones.
We never brought flocked ones back because we couldn't burn them, and that was our initial intent, was to cut them up and burn
I don't know what our intent was. We just dragged them back.
Well, it was really funny because there were times when whoever was sitting on that edge would be holding the top of it and just dragging it along the street. I mean, we wouldn't even put it in the car, and they'd be dragging it along the street. See, where we were on Rio Vista on Silver, there was an alley there on the houses on Silver. So yeah, we'd go up and down the alleys. But no, that one's blocked. We can't take that one because that one won't burn. But it was, it's funny. But no, I don't really remember a whole lot about Christmas. Some of the stuff in my past is really quite vague. But I do remember the tumbleweed. And
how did you stand it up? I mean,
it was big enough. It just sat.
Just sat there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. My aunt would, I could just do anything I wanted, and I was usually pretty reasonable, but she would let me do just about anything I wanted. If I wanted to make a tent in the living room to sleep in, that was fine with her. And if I wanted to leave it up for 3 days in her living room, that was fine with her. It's whatever I wanted to do was okay. Except I got stung by a bee on the bottom of my foot because I never wore shoes there. But when we came to Los Angeles on the bus, I had to wear shoes. Well, my girlfriend had sandals, and that didn't bother it, so I borrowed her sandals. My Aunt Tessie would not let me walk to the bus and wear the sandals into Los Angeles. I had to get them back and wear my regular shoes, and hurt my bee sting. I thought she was unreasonable.
Seems kind of unreasonable.
I don't know what the deal was. I have to this day, I don't have a clue as to why she wouldn't let me wear the sandals.
Who knows? What kind of gifts did you typically get for Christmas?
Clothes.
Okay. Moving right along.
Yeah, that was pretty much it. I remember one time I got some stationery, and I got some, maple syrup candy. And I remember that because the price tag was still left on it, and it was something like 79 cents. And I was crushed that they only spent. Isn't that? Oh, kids are just so weird sometimes. I could hardly get over that they had only spent 79 cents on it.
How dare they?
And I enjoyed it. I mean, it's not like I threw it out or anything.
Yeah.
I ate it. And yet I don't know.
What did you do for Easter? Go to church?
I don't.
Have a dinner?
Probably.
Nice dinner?
I remember some of the dinners at the Methodist church. The one lady, she'd bring a carton of cottage cheese, plop it into a bowl, and put it on the table. That was her. That was what she would bring. I remember when we had the sacrament. We only had the sacrament every quarter. And we had these little glasses, and it was grape juice. Fortunately, it wasn't wine. And we never had grape juice, and I tell you, I thought that was marvelous. Drink it really slowly. I don't remember whether it was bread or it was some kind of a wafer or cracker. I don't remember, but I certainly remember the little teeny glasses and the grape juice. And if more people came that Sunday, they would just rinse them in water and refill them. And my mother was always concerned about that because they weren't actually washed, and a different person was drinking out of that. We never shared. I don't remember in growing up ever sharing a glass or a fork or a plate or something. Everybody had their own, and when I see Alex and Julie, they're passing around the glass or the bottle or whatever, I cringe. I want my own. I don't want to share it. I shared things with Dick, but that was different. But I didn't eat off my kids' plates. You know, Cousin Linda. They would make the food and serve the children, and their dinner was what was left on the children's plates.
What?
And I said, Linda, that's really not very sanitary. And that's not teaching your kids very good habits.
What if they eat it all?
Evidently, they were all picky eaters, and they never did. I don't know. I didn't quite understand the logic behind that. I really didn't. Unless they were so poor they couldn't afford more. I don't know. That might have been the case. But it just didn't seem like a good way to do things. Oh, well.
What if, I guess the Easter Bunny wasn't, in existence
I'm
then?
sure we got probably some little thing at Easter time from the Easter Bunny, but I don't remember it played up to the extent it is now. It's ridiculous.
You didn't go to the mall and get your picture taken with the Easter Bunny?
There weren't no malls. They hadn't invented them yet. There were department stores, and I don't recall anything like that at the time. Marketing hadn't reached that pinnacle yet.
Yeah. What about the 4th of July?
I always spent that at my Aunt Tessie's for years, as long as we could. And I'm sorry, my nose itches. And we always had fireworks, and across the street, it was a street. It was called Electric Avenue, but it was actually more like an alley. It wasn't paved, and there were chuck holes and stuff. And then across the street, because there was Front Street, and here was Electric, and there was a house here, and then our house, my aunt's house. And then there were space for 3 houses that faced Front Street, but they hadn't been built. It was bare lot. And so that's where we'd set off the skyrockets, and trains coming, because the train tracks were right. The train's coming, shoot off a skyrocket. So we'd try to shoot one off, and we had Roman candles, which you don't have anymore. You're actually holding it while these different colored fireballs are coming out of it.
Yeah, they don't have those anymore.
And we had pinwheels where you nail them onto a post or something like that, or nail them to the front of the garage. And I loved them. I thought those were so neat. The skyrockets were really
Those are like bottle rockets, right?
Skyrocket? No, it had a cone shaped, and then the body of it, and then the fuse, and you would make a wooden trough about yay long and stick it in the ground about this angle, and then you would set the skyrocket on there. You would light it, and then it would just take off like crazy, and then boom. Loved him.
Oh, cool.
They don't sell things like that
No,
anymore. But my brother Glenn,
state.
he was famous. He would take maybe 5 or 6 different sizes of firecrackers and undo them, because they always came in, where you could light one.
Yeah.
Anyway, he would undo them, and so he'd have this pan, and he'd have a punk in his hand, and he'd have this pan, and he'd have 5 or 6 different sizes. And so then he would light one and decide where he was going to throw it, and we had a fish pond, and so he'd take the little teeny lady fingers, and he'd light it and waited just until it was barely in, and then he'd drop it into the fish pond, and it would explode in the fish pond. You're going to hurt my fish! Oh, I hated it when he did that. And there was the day when the punk end of it fell into there, and he dropped that pan and ran because everything was going bang. That was fun. But yeah, we always had a dinner, and there was my Aunt Annie and my Uncle Tom, who I think were my great aunt's aunt and uncle, and then my sister Aunt Margaret and her husband Leonard, and they had 2 kids, and then my mom and dad, and my grandparents, and then the 3 of us kids, and we'd have dinner at my great aunt's, Aunt Tessie's and Uncle Bill's. And then there was the Thanksgiving. We had Thanksgiving dinner out there from time to time also. And my Uncle Tom lost his teeth. They fell out. I guess he opened his mouth too wide or something like that, and his false teeth fell out. Us kids, we just...
And that was at dinner?
And he was very, very straight-laced, and he just threw his handkerchief over them, picked them up, and got up from the table and walked out of the room, and nothing was said. And us, my two brothers and I, we were just dying. We just... Because we didn't know anybody that had false teeth. Because my parents had their own teeth, and my grandparents all had their own teeth, and we just... Oh, funny things like that.
Were there any other special holidays that you remember? Did I just ask you that?
No.
No, I must have been thinking. New Year's, Thanksgiving.
No, New Year's the tradition became later after I was married that I would always buy a really difficult jigsaw puzzle at Christmas, and then we would do that on New Year's Eve. But I don't really remember. We might very well have done these things. I have no recollection of them.
What things did you do for your birthday? Birthday celebration or
Well, I'm sure we always
gifts?
had a cake. The cake was the big thing with candles, to blow out the candles. Never had a birthday party. I don't know whether either of my brothers ever had a birthday party either. And there were kids in the neighborhood, but I guess birthday parties don't cost as much as they do now. I understand you have to buy little baggies full of stuff to give everybody who comes to the
Well, it
party.
depends on how much you want to spend.
Yeah, we just really didn't have a lot of people over to the house, so I don't really remember much of any kind of parties, and I don't remember any birthday parties. I'm sure we got more clothes for our birthday.
Probably.
No, I'm sure we just really did not have a lot of choice when we were growing up. We just didn't. And I think it was partly because of the economics of the whole situation. There just wasn't a lot of money to spend on things like that. And so what do you need? Well, you need clothes, so okay, let's buy them clothes and give them as a gift. But that's all right. I mean, we just, in fact, I always felt that, especially as teenagers, when we then had the car that my brother was driving, and of course he wasn't working, he was in high school, and so was always having to ask for money for gas or ask for this. And Walt was never shy about asking my folks for things, where Glenn and I would bend over backwards not to ask for anything because we knew there wasn't a lot of money to spend on things. Because by then my dad was the only one who was working. But Walt just, if he wanted something, he just went and asked for it, and he usually got it. In fact, my mother by then was sewing especially for him, shirts. He must have had dozens of shirts. And he'd maybe wear 3 in a day, and they all needed ironing.
Why is he wearing 3 in a day?
Oh, well, you wear one to school, and then when you come home, you're going to do other kinds of things, so you change it, and then maybe you're going to do something else in the evening, so you change it again. And he had plenty, so why not? He didn't do the ironing or the washing. I did the washing quite a bit as a teenager. I liked doing that. I mean, we actually had, I don't know, I guess we had a ringer washer. So then you slosh it in the other thing, yeah.
Washboard and a...
Oh, well, it wasn't quite that bad. It wasn't quite that bad. Even when I was a little kid, we did have a washing machine on that porch, but it had a ringer, and we were always told to be very, very cautious because we knew people who the kid had run their arm through the ringer, because once you got started, they
It was automatic.
It was an electric machine, actually. The agitator worked electrically, and
But you feed
it in, and once it's on, it goes through, and
right.
it withered their arm. In fact, I knew someone as an adult, and his one arm was almost useless, and that was what had happened. It had gone through a ringer when he was a kid. So it could be pretty bad. So I was very, very careful, but even as a little kid, I used to help a lot with doing the laundry. And of course we hung everything out. I hang everything out here in the summertime. In fact, it's been warm enough that I can make 3 layers thick because I put my garment down and then I put a towel over it. I
Wow.
wash sheets. In fact, I did 2 loads the other day, and so I had all this stuff strung out, and then I just put the sheets over. I'm not supposed to hang things on your railing, but I figure with all this lattice work, who's going to see it? Sorry, my nose is itchy again.
Let's see. So, did your family entertain often? Have friends over, or?
No. No, when we were on Patton Street, my mom and the neighbor across the street, Mrs. Masterson, I probably knew what her first name was then, but she was always Mrs. Masterson. My mother called her Mrs. Masterson, and they were really good friends. They would go to the show on Wednesday nights, and they would hire a babysitter, either Mrs. Masterson's son, Jimmy, who I thought I would grow up and marry. No, anyway, he would babysit, or there were twin boys, 4 or 5 houses up, Leonard and Lester Watts. One of them would sometimes babysit, but it was sort of like my mom's night out. And my dad, he wasn't always home, just depended on what kind of shift he had, because sometimes he'd be home for 2 or 3 hours in the afternoon and then have to go back to work and work until late into the night, because the streetcars used to run a lot, because that was their mass transportation. People didn't have cars and relied on the streetcars.
Let's see. How did you keep cool in the summer?
Besides opening the windows.
Did you go like a public pool or?
No, there was where we were. There was no pools available. I mean, we were fairly close to downtown Los Angeles. My high school didn't even have a pool. I don't know whether John Marshall did or not. It was in a more affluent neighborhood. They might have, but my high school had one tennis court and had a football field that could be used, but there were no bleachers. So when I was a senior, we held our football games at the Rose Bowl in Pasadena. If you don't think that was a bit of a joke trying to get there, because again, hardly anybody had cars except teachers.
Yeah.
And I actually went to some of them. I don't remember how I got there. Somebody must have driven me. Anyway, I just really don't remember much of anybody. We just, again, were a pretty close-knit society without a lot of necessity of having other people.
Do you remember any blizzards, tornadoes, or floods? Earthquakes, maybe?
Most of yeah, okay. I was in, was I in college then when that earthquake, or was I high school? It was like 6-ish something in the morning, and I'm in this big room all by myself, and it just shook and shook, and I, please stop, please stop, please stop. Anyway, it didn't do any damage at our house. It actually did have a snowstorm. Again, I was in high school, and we were up there on North Alvarado, and it started snowing that night. And wow, I was so excited. I don't think I'd ever really been in the snow, period. And so, look, it's snowing. But of course, it didn't stay. But when I woke up that morning, everything was white. There was probably about 3 inches of snow. I was so excited. It was just really great. And it was so cold. I mean, when you pick it up, it's cold. I don't know, when you see it in movies, it just looks like it ought to be so soft. And it wasn't. It wasn't. Anyway, why, I have no idea, but I decided I had to go to school. Well, there was snow on all the sidewalks and trying to get down the hill. So the one street that you could go down had about 8 feet of sidewalk and then about 8 or 10 stairs, then sidewalk, stairs, and there was a metal railing. So here I am with viola and all my books, and that's before they were making backpacks. I mean, you just had to carry everything. And so you skid down and grab the railing, and then you get down the stairs. It's a wonder I didn't kill myself getting down there, getting to the streetcar. Here's the boys up on the flat roof, throwing snowballs, and by then, it's all. And I thought, why didn't I just stay home and enjoy it? I mean, nobody would have cared. I never missed school, so I could have missed one day. But no, I had to get to school and felt like I'd almost killed myself, and I never really enjoyed it. But That was, I did take pictures that morning, so I have some pictures of our house with snow. And the LA River flooded from time to time, but we didn't, our ward building was down near it, but we weren't, so we didn't worry about it.
I have no idea what time it is.
I don't either, don't have my watch, and the clock in here, it's always 10 minutes to 5. Even when it's running, it's still 10 minutes to 5. I bought that at one of the, at the first silent auction that you guys had, I guess one
for Girls Camp.
And I thought it was really nice, and I replaced the battery, and it runs, and I noticed it stopped running now. But it's been running for years, but its chime never changes. So I thought, I hate to throw it away. It looks nice, but of what value is it? So I had to chuck it. No, I have no idea what time it is.
Are you doing okay? Do you want to do more? Or?
We can do a little bit more, maybe another 10 or 15 minutes.
Okay.
As long as my nose doesn't get itchy. I don't know what's wrong. My mother, what did she say? When your nose itches, you're going to kiss a fool. I don't. You never heard that?
No.
Oh, yeah. When your hand itches, it means you're going to get money or something like that.
Ear itches, your ear's burning, somebody's talking about you.
Yeah, always nice.
My phone's ringing again.
So it is, pardon me.
Okay. All right. So we left off on things you did as a family and holidays and stuff like that.
Okay.
So now we have friends and games and school. So I think we talked about, or did we talk about toys? You said you didn't have a lot of toys growing up. You did
that sounds
play
right.
games as a family.
Yeah.
Did we talk about your favorite foods?
No. No.
What were your favorite foods?
Spaghetti. We had that quite a bit. I don't know.
You said you liked baking cakes a lot.
Yeah, I used to make cakes and cookies. Never learned to make a pie until after I was married. We really ate very plain food. Nothing. Though we did eat Mexican food. We had enchiladas a lot. But then my nose started itching again. It hasn't itched for days. We lived in a heavy Hispanic area, and so we did a lot of enchiladas. We did mainly things with hamburger. I don't remember having much of any other kind of meat.
What kind of books did you read as a kid?
The Five Little Peppers and How They Grew and all the whole series. I never read Anne of Green Gables until I was an adult, though I just never came across it. I don't remember a lot of them, I just remember that, and as I got a little bit older, up into high school, I got to a science fiction phase. I didn't read anything but science fiction when I was in high school. And I went through the cowboy phase, and my reading became much more diverse as an adult than it did as a child. Though we went to the library all the time. I mean, we did read a lot. I just don't remember a lot of what they were.
What kind of hobbies did you have?
I guess you'd call reading a hobby.
Well, you said you used to stay up late and read. Was that, do you remember any books in particular that you read?
No, just whatever was at hand, I would read. I learned to knit, but I learned to do that on my own. My mother and grandmother knit. They did crochet, but they were left-handed, and they were not able to teach me, so I had to teach myself. And that usually was in high school when I taught myself to knit and to crochet. I didn't particularly like sewing.
How often did you go to the library?
In elementary school, we went every week. It was within walking distance of our house. We didn't, in that day and age, you didn't have libraries in the school itself, elementary school. Your teacher might have, some assorted books in her classroom, but there was never a library room or anything like that. But we went to the Echo Park branch of the Los Angeles Public Library System, which was within walking distance. Loved it. I can even remember the inside of that building and the huge magnolia trees out in front. It was on a very busy corner, Glendale Boulevard and Temple Street. It was right there.
Who was your best friend? Do you remember ever having a best friend growing up?
Yeah, they were always the girls that were sick. I always palled around with girls that were sick. Let's see. Patricia Gray, Mary Honora Elizabeth Ann Murnahan. I was always proud when I could say her full name. Those were girls. And Pat Gray was my friend in junior high. And we didn't call her Mary Honora Elizabeth Ann, but we called her Honora. She was my best friend through elementary school, junior high, and yeah, I think she was also in my high school. But we did have, we always thought it was really neat. You've probably never heard of him, but Leo Carrillo was a movie star, played the Cisco Kid's, sidekick or something like that. He was a character actor. Well, his granddaughter Charlotte Carrillo was in our class in elementary school, and we also had a little girl whose father was a furrier, and she would come with her fur coats, and that was not too popular.
What did you do with your friends?
When I was in junior high, my friend lived in an apartment complex near the junior high, and occasionally I would go over to her apartment. I just thought this is the weirdest thing. We had individual houses, but for somebody to actually live in an apartment in like a 6-story building, to me was just really way out in outer space, and it smelled, cabbage and all this sort of stuff. Anyway, I'd go over there once in a while. And then, of course, we always had our violin to practice. I don't know how my mother actually went through 3 kids playing the violin. I just can't imagine how awful that must have been. And in junior high, I also, for one semester, I took piano lessons. And the piano teacher, I have no idea how we ever contacted her, but she was near my junior high, so I would walk to her house and then catch a streetcar. And you have to realize when you take public transportation back and forth to school, you spend a lot of time on the streetcar, a lot of time walking. So I learned to play football in the middle of the street with because I had brothers and they had friends, and so I was usually the only girl on the football team, and they weren't too happy with that. I never could remember, you can't pass beyond the line of scrimmage. What line? What line? I don't see any line. Anyway.
Were there any other organized games that you played, like hopscotch or jump rope?
Always played hopscotch, and I liked jacks. I always played jacks. You'd take those to school with you, and we had an outdoor pavilion with tables and benches, and so you'd bring your jacks and your ball to school. I had some special ones. I actually still have some of them. They were, some of them were really sort of pointed, and these were sort of rounded, and they were a little bit heavier oil left there. But yeah, I loved hopscotch. That was always fun.
What did you use as a marker?
All kinds of weird things.
Rock?
No, never just a rock. It was usually something stuck on a safety pin or something like that. Something odd. Jump rope, I wasn't great at jump rope, but I did that. I always hated the girls at school, in elementary school. They were doing the double, and I never could do that.
I could do it.
No, in fact, I almost never, when 2 girls were, turning the rope, I never could jump in like that. I just had to jump rope individually. I don't know, it's because I fell down a lot or what, but I was never too successful at that. And in school, let's see, we played dodgeball, and we had one of these maypoles. I don't know whether I mentioned that before. That was, there were about 6 ropes hanging on this big metal thing, and they had big knots, and it was big rope, and then you'd get on it, everybody'd run around, and then you'd let go, and you'd go swinging around. Well, you'd always have one person that would go all over everybody's rope, and back to the place where they were. And once you start running, and then they really sail around, that was always fun. Of course, I fell down a lot. So.
Did you ever learn how to swim, or
Nope.
go swimming?
Nope. When I lived with my aunt and uncle, and I'd be there through all my summer vacations, we would go down to a place at the beach called Anaheim Landing. I don't even know where it was, but there was a wall, a wooden wall on two sides, and so when the tide was in, the water would be clear to the wall, but then when it was out, it would, there'd be a sandy beach. And they'd take me there, and I remember my aunt or my uncle holding me in the water, and then they would let go, and then I would sink. I mean, they were trying to teach me to float, and I never learned.
That's right. I remember you saying you went as a family to the pool, and only your dad would go swimming, and you'd watch.
Well, this was almost as bad. I loved, and you never put anything on to prevent sunburn, and I would come home from a day at the beach in this little bitty sunsuit, and I'd just be red like a lobster. And I remember my Aunt Tessie, I'd take off the sunsuit, stand on newspaper, and she would pour this calamine lotion, I guess, all over me. But I just...
What good is that?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, it takes the pain away.
Wouldn't itch then, I guess.
Yeah. But no, I never learned to swim until I had 3 children, and I took a Red Cross summer 2 weeks with a neighbor. We decided we could do that together, and it's a scary thing. I am not good. In fact, when we had our pool there in Bakersfield, okay, I'm going to dive in. Don't anybody get near me. Don't touch me. And if I could swim across the pool, but I can't turn my head and breathe. So I can only swim as far as I can hold my breath. Swimming was not real successful. And of course, when I was young, there was no place to go swimming. Mm-hmm. My high school didn't have a pool. I didn't have a pool until I was in college, and I never would have considered having to get into a bathing suit. No way. I took tennis and volleyball.
Did you have organized sports teams in elementary school? Anything like, or junior high?
Maybe junior high. I don't remember because music was my thing, and I didn't go out for sports. I'm sure in junior high we must have, but not in elementary school. And there weren't, like now, nobody played soccer. Not when I was growing up. Not in Los Angeles.
Okay, the next 3 questions. Okay, what was the most mischievous thing you did as a youngster?
Me? Oh, I'm sure there was nothing.
Anything you and your brothers ever did that you never told your parents about?
Isn't that funny? No, not that. I do remember one time my mom had made a cake and it was all frosted, and I would, keep going around the edge, and I'd keep going around the edge, and finally it was, who has been eating the frosting on this cake? And I never admitted to it, so all 3 of us had to sit on chairs. I never admitted to it. And I did steal a piece of candy once at the it was called Paul's Drugstore, and they even had a Ponce special. Something that my mom really liked that would make, that was a Ponce special, and they had a little table out there. They had the little penny candies, and I took one once, and I never told anybody, and I never gave them the penny. I guess I was unrepentant. I don't know.
Were you under 8?
Mm-hmm.
Well,
so maybe it was okay. Besides, I wasn't baptized till I was 13, so I guess washed it away. We actually weren't all that mischievous, as I recall. Never cut class, never. In my whole school career, I never cut class. I mean, I had to be there.
Who did you admire most when you were young? Okay, next question. Has there ever been anyone in your life that you consider to be your soulmate?
Nah.
Okay.
No, this admiration thing. After we joined the church, I had a see, I was 13, a young women's teacher that I really had a lot of admiration for. Her name was Lulu Jones. I don't know, I remember that. I really thought she was up here on this pedestal. Of course, I still hated coming, but I thought she was really, really neat person. I guess that's not part of my makeup, you know.
Yeah. No soulmate?
No, nah.
Okay, let's talk about school. Where did you go to school?
I went to Cortez Street Elementary School, which was on the same property as the elementary school my mother went to, only when she went there, it was Temple Street School. It was between Temple Street, which was a big, busy street, and the yellow streetcars ran on that, and Cortez Street, which was a little residential street. And when she went there, it was older buildings, and they were built facing and close to Temple Street, which was on a slight hill. And then they tore all that down, and they rebuilt a school facing Cortez Street, and then all the playground was between that street and Temple Street, and renamed it, and so that's where I went. It was a nice school. I went back once to visit. I can't remember whether I was in junior high or high school, and you know the hall seemed so small, and the classrooms were so small, though it seemed pretty big when I went there. And I started kindergarten there and graduated from 6th grade. Played in the orchestra. And I even remember my 5th grade teacher was Mrs. Hardy. She would read to us. So I loved reading, but I loved also being read to. My dad used to read to us. My mom, I don't remember my mom reading to us, but my dad would.
What would he read?
All kinds of books, you know, chapter books. I only learned from my grandchildren. We never called them that, but they were chapter books. And when it was at the end of the chapter, that was all you got. Oh, Dad, read some more, read some more. No, that's all. I don't remember what they were, but I just remember loved that.
Did you have a favorite teacher?
Mrs. Hardy, that's probably why I remember her name. And it was interesting because there was a house across the street from the school, and I don't remember whether the school district owned that house or what, but I know the teachers would go across the street in that house and smoke during their lunchtime or this kind of thing, and we thought that was pretty shocking. I mean, we weren't members of the church, but smoking, that was really pretty shocking. Well, Miss Bates, she was the music teacher.
What was your favorite subject?
Favorite subject, of course, it'd have to be reading. I was overly fond of history, and math was okay, but of course we didn't call it math, we called it arithmetic. Music and reading, because I played in the orchestra every year from about 2nd grade probably. Played the violin in the orchestra. We didn't have a band, we had an orchestra.
There's a difference.
Lots of kids played stringed instruments there.
Yeah. So did you mainly get to school riding the streetcars or walking or both?
Elementary school we walked, both my brothers and I, because it was fairly close up our street, down through an alley, and then across the street, and then it was about another half a block. So it, was pretty close. When we did junior high, my junior high was Central Junior High, which was within walking distance of the Los Angeles City Hall. It was right in downtown Los Angeles, and of course we took the streetcar. We could pay and take the yellow streetcar by walking up to Temple Street and catching it, or we could go free by walking the other direction and catching the Pacific Electric red car going into the subway terminal. You went up big ramps, and then you were out on Hill Street, then you'd catch another streetcar and go to where it would drop you off at the bottom of the hill and walk up to the junior high. And we did it both ways. It was nice going through the subway. It didn't cost us anything to ride because we were pass riders because my dad worked for him. But inside the subway terminal, when you get up there on the main street, at the main level, they had, chewing gum and candy and all that, so we'd get our supply of chewing gum for the day. That's when I really used to chew gum.
Okay, I'm gonna change the tape now
Okie dokie.
because it's flashing at me.